Good afternoon, everyone. I am Keisha Burton. I'm a community program coordinator with the Recycling Partnership, and today we're going to be discussing how to fight contamination in your curbside recycling programs. Joining me today will be Tori Carley from the City of Greensboro. She's the waste reduction supervisor there, and she is going to be sharing with us the successes of her cart tagging program for the City of Greensboro and some of their challenges, as well as steps that they'd like to take going forward to help improve their program or continue to improve their program. So I'm going to jump right in and just say that as the partnership, we believe in working hand in hand with communities to help, working hand in hand with communities and companies to help Americans recycle well and to have access to recycling and to recycle right. We do this by focusing on improving operations, ensuring that communities have all the resources they need to help improve their education or make education outreach a more quality tool that can lead to measurable change in communities. How do we plan on doing this? Well, our focus has been on increasing access to recycling for all Americans across the nation, but also seeing the capture of viable recyclables. We've done research that shows that on average, communities generate, residents can generate up to 800 pounds of recycling per household. And our goal is to really strive to pull most of that material out and to capture as much of it as possible. But we also want to capture as much quality material as we can. So we want the material that we're collecting to be good, clean, quality recycling. We do this by working with our funding partners, either some of our funding partners that provide funds to us that help us go in and leverage that funding in communities to help improve the recycling system overall. These are some of the communities we work with. We work with communities from large to small communities across the nation, whether that's implementing a cart-based service through our cart grant program, or going into communities like El Paso, Texas, or Massachusetts, where we help them build an anti-contamination program for their communities. We're able to do this through the assistance of our funding partners. So as it relates to curbside contamination, we really want to get a handle on curbing our contamination. Let's see here. I see, Jill, you have your hand raised. Give me 1 minute and I will get straight to you, okay? But when it comes to contamination, that's essentially the definition is it's whatever material is going in the recycling stream that just should not be there, right? Essentially, we want clean recycling, but we're not seeing that in our communities. We know that our communities are dealing with a twin bin challenge in that for residents, they are seeing the convenience of having two bins. They're having a trash receptacle that they can easily throw all their waste into, but we're also losing good quality recycling to the trash. But they also have the convenience of a recycling bin at home, but they're also placing into this recycling cart trash items or just items that they may think is recyclable because they're wish recyclers or aspiration recyclers. And so the challenge that we're facing is really curbing the trash that's going into our recycling and pulling clean recyclables out of the trash. So we know that communities like yours are facing these challenges. Like this bin here has yard waste in it. There's bulk and rigid items, electronics, and all kinds of things going into the system. And for a resident, there is definitely a disconnect where they don't necessarily see that once it leaves their cart, it goes to a processing facility. And this is where it now has to be completely cleaned out. So facilities across the country are facing issues with plastic film, bags, flexible packaging, and due to a change in how material packaging are being produced, but also because we have done not the greatest job of having good, streamlined quality education. This is a star screen at a MRF, and this is common across the nation to find star screens filled with plastic film. And as you know, these are a hazard in the facility. We really want to strive to see the program clean, so that way we see a star screen like this. This is like the mecca of what we would want to see happen in a MRF, right? But we know that contamination is on the rise across the country with communities, and we've seen communities facing 20% contamination or higher. And this costs the system time and money, and it increases the hazards to employees at these facilities that have to go back and pull this material out of the stream and pull this material out of the equipment. But there are bright spots. There are communities that are also seeing less than 10% contamination. We have communities such as Denver, Colorado, and Outagamie County, Wisconsin, where their contamination rate is far below the 20% that we've been seeing across the board. So what do they have in common? They all have an education budget, and they all engage with their communities at minimum once a year through an annual mailer or just some sort of refresher for their residents. But they also have a tagging program with a rejection protocol at the curb. And this is the feet on the street. This is the direct engagement at the curb that's intended to help institute a behavior change for a positive. It'll help shift and pivot residents into being an active participant in keeping the recycling system stream clean. So how do we do that? Well, the partnership has an anti-contamination toolkit on our website, and it is free to download. This kit is essentially your step-by-step guide to how you could develop an outreach plan for your community, prepare your communications and your media, develop a staff and a team around you that will go out and inspect recycling carts and tag carts for contamination, and deploy your anti-contamination kit. But it also help you with resources in terms of tracking, because we want to make sure that if you're going to be doing this tagging program with rejection, that you track it, so that way we can see the effective change that is being done. So our toolkit utilizes a 3-phase system. The first phase being the inform and trigger phase, and this is where we engage our residents with our info card. It's an annual card that would reinforce what we want them to recycle. This is the recycle right piece. It's going to tell them what they can put in their bin and what they can't put in their cart. And then we come through with phase 2, which is our feet on the street. This is where we utilize a team to go through the system, through the routes, and through the community, just taking a look in recycling carts. And if they identify things that shouldn't be in the cart, then they're going to do a light enforcement. So this is like a combination of education and enforcement. They're going to tag the cart for what they've seen that should not be in the cart, and they're going to turn the cart away from the curb, so that way the drivers can't service it. And what this essentially does is put the onus back on the resident to clean up their cart. The cart will not be serviced. It tells the resident, we're not going to pick this cart up if you have contamination in it, because it's a serious problem. Just like there are rules for managing their solid waste, there has to be rules for managing your recycling. And if you put the onus back on the resident, they become an active participant in the actual system versus you collecting it and dealing with it as it goes downstream. And then we like to support all of this work by focusing and zeroing in on a specific issue that you're facing in your community. So if you don't want plastic bags in your stream, and that's the top issue that your MRF is dealing with, then we would develop a top issue mailer that is going to zero in on that one specific issue, and you're going to build a supporting campaign around that. And you can do this through direct mailers, through billboards and different various signage. You can also use social media and bus wraps and truck wraps to also help support this message. And these 3 pieces together really help to educate the residents on what they should be doing. So this is the true method of recycling right. With our messaging, we know that communities have kind of engaged in this pattern of having a long list of what you can recycle and what you can't recycle. But we know that most people can only remember correctly in succession about 7 to 8 items at a time. So if you're looking at this list versus the one on the right, which is a lot more simple, and it's consistent and it's clear, which one would you remember? For me, it's a lot easier to remember cans, cartons, glass, paper, and plastics than it is to recycle. Well, I think I can recycle other food bottles and jars, as well as non-bottle PET containers and lids, and ice cream containers and such, and so and so. You want to make sure that the messaging is simple and easy to remember, so that way they can do it, right? So we back this up with our info card, because we know that if we keep the message simple, most people want to recycle right. We have our wish cyclers and our aspirational recyclers, and we just have our everyday person that's just trying to do a good job. They want to recycle right. Yes, this presentation will be available for download, but they want to recycle right? They're not really trying to recycle or put trash in their carts. We do have a few that are essentially doing that, but most people really make the effort to do it right, and they just want to be informed. So we do this through simple messaging. For our feet on the street portion, where we're tagging carts, like I said, we can do tags that look and come in different shapes and sizes, but these are the ones that the partnership uses. And if you use our campaign builder, you're going to have something developed just like that. It's going to be print ready. But we like to keep the messaging simple. We like to tie in the actual message so this looks and feels like the info card, but this is the enforcement piece where we're just focusing on the 5 to 6 items that we are seeing in the MRF that we want out of the system. And then from this 5 to 6 item list, we then select our top issue, our item specific that we're going to really target through the community that we want out of the system. And that's what we build our issue specific messaging around, is that one issue. So for a lot of communities, this issue has been consistently plastic bags and film in the stream, because we all know that the MRFs are having a really hard time managing the film that is being stuck in the star screen throughout the system. So does this work? We know it works, but then we have a question of whether or not you should reject, because I did say that we should have a rejection protocol, right? We have worked with communities that really felt that rejecting carts would just really, they were really adverse to doing that, because they felt that their residents were so special that their residents were going to hear they were rejecting carts, and one day they were going to show up to work and find thousands of carts in the parking lot, right? I'm pretty certain there are many of you out there who deal with customers and deal with residents, and you've heard this threat that, you know what, I don't like the way you're operating. I'm going to just give you your cart back, and that's the end of it. So we've experienced having to deal with that, managing that mindset. So we have a community here. We have two. We have Dartmouth, Massachusetts, and New Bedford, Massachusetts. They are sister communities. They share the same recycling coordinator. Both communities we worked with to do a tagging program for them, and they both decided to go about it in different ways. In Dartmouth, they did decide to reject carts and essentially leave their residents to their own devices to clear out the carts, and we'll come back on your next service day and pick it up. In New Bedford, they decided that, you know, rejecting the carts were going to create a lot more trouble than it was worth, and they decided not to reject carts. They decided to just go with education. We'll put the tag on, but we're still going to service it. They had completely different outcomes, even though they shared the same coordinator, the same information. In Dartmouth, they saw a 45% decrease in their tagging, and in New Bedford, they saw a 22% decrease in tagging. And although this is really positive for both communities, you clearly see here that when you reject the carts, you get the best benefit, right? So in addition to rejecting carts, we also worry that, okay, the resident doesn't want to recycle. What does that mean? They're just not going to put their cart out then if they know we're rejecting carts. We've done this across the board for many different communities, and the one thing that has remained consistent is that participation and set out remains relatively stable throughout the entire program. What does change is the positive behavior change. There is a shift from poor behavior when it comes to recycling and contamination to a new relative low contamination going in bins. So this chart here shows that by the third intervention, we see our tagging, or our number of tagging rate drop to a relative low, and it roughly stays pretty stable and pretty low throughout the remainder of all intervention, right? And we're finding this across the board. So I have a question here from Jenny. Have you used tagging carts in a system that is private, i.e. multiple haulers in an area? Jenny, I actually would have to check our notes on that. I can't recall one off the top of my head, but I'm certain that we have. So what I'll do is I will follow up with you and the group after this webinar. Okay. So, oops, sorry. So are there any other questions? Let's see. Okay, so I'm now going to go ahead and introduce Tori Carley, from the Waste Reduction Supervisor for the City of Greensboro. She'll go over the tagging program for her community, the successes that she's seen there, some of the challenges and the benefits, as well as what they plan on doing with their tagging program going forward.
Hi everyone, so like Keisha said, my name is Tori Carley, Waste Reduction Supervisor for the City of Greensboro. And if you don't know Greensboro, we are in the Triad region of North Carolina. We're the third largest city. And a really cool fact is that we started the first single stream recycling program on the East Coast. And we are still working with the exact same MRF that we started with, despite changes in ownership over the past few years. Now, we do have brown recycling carts. And so as you're looking at this presentation, don't be confused. The brown cart is the recycling cart and the green cart is the garbage cart. Next slide, please. So just to look at our program, we have 90,100 households every other week collection, and we are municipally collected. Our contamination rate is anywhere from 22 to 30% depending on who you ask. And our program collects approximately 125 tons every year. Now our tagging program, if you see the picture in the top right-hand portion of the screen, we started that in July of 2018. And our program is a little different because we don't just do an intervention or several interventions over a period of time. Our program is ongoing throughout the year. And that's because we use our recycling drivers, and we do have one dedicated inspector that his main job is to inspect carts for recycling. We do have enforcement that rejects those carts, and I will get a little bit more into that in a bit. And we also remove recycling carts if residents do not comply with recycling guidelines after a certain number of notifications. And since we started this program in July of last year, we have had more than 12,000 interactions with residents, which hugely increases the number of times that we can touch people in order to try and get them to change their ways. Next slide, please. Now, I firmly believe that you cannot have education without policy in place, and you cannot have a policy without some sort of education in place. North Carolina has a law that not very many people know about where plastic bottles and aluminum cans are banned from landfills. There's very little education around that, and there's also no enforcement. So there's no policy to back up that quote unquote law. So our feet on the street is limited to 1 employee. We used to have 4, but over the years through recessions, those positions were riffed. And our contamination rate has been 18, 22 and above since 2015 based on our MRF reported data. And that's one reason why we're not 100% sure about the contamination rate, because we're not sure if it's the whole MRF data or if it's just the city of Greensboro data, because they do accept from other contracts. And we also, we have a really long-standing program, and so our bad behaviors are really well ingrained. So just like we see lots of bagged recycling, bags and wrap in recycling. Our brown carts are used as a spare trash can. Sometimes people move from other places and they're confused, so we see trash because of that. And we see a lot of things in our recycling carts that we would like to not see. Next slide. So we have our drivers and our inspectors. Our drivers can see contamination either sticking out of the cart or in their hopper via a camera. They don't have time to physically get out of the vehicle and tag the cart with an oops or a skip sticker, or you might have hang tags in your community. But they are equipped with a tablet so that they can virtually tag. Conversely, the inspectors do have time to get out of their vehicles. Next slide, please. And I've got a couple of pictures. So you'll see bagged recycling in that picture. In the next one, you will see styrofoam, trash, who knows. Next picture. Lots of air filters for some reason. Broom handles, mop handles, those as well. Next picture. And just general garbage. So lots of issues. Next slide, please. So when we are tracking in the field, our current app allows drivers and inspectors to virtually tag an address. Go ahead and click. And this is what it looks like. Either the tablet or the other one is a screenshot from my phone. They have various options, and using the back button, they can toggle to a couple of different screens. So that's why you're seeing 2 different things on those screens. Now, when a driver clicks a skip cart or hopper contamination or garbage in the recycling, we want some more specifics behind like why they're skipping the cart, or what kind of garbage is in the cart, if they can tell. And so if you click again, so this is the next screen that pops up. They're able to verify the address. And then if you click one more time, they can select, ooh, go back. They can select various items to be able to put that in the system, so that we know and we can put on the postcard that we're going to send to the residents that they have clothing and textiles, plastic bags, and scrap metal in there. And they can even type in something really specific, like we had sheetrock in there one time, and one of the drivers took the time to type in sheetrock. Next slide, please. So our inspectors, we do have one dedicated inspector. This is not our dedicated inspector. This is my educator, Lane. And he is going out every single day that we collect and lifting the lid, looking in carts. And then he's also going around when the drivers are tagging, if they skip something, the inspector is going to go and put a notice on that cart to let the resident know that we didn't skip them on accident, we skipped them on purpose, and why, and that we're not going to be picking that up. So the inspector is going to be able to physically tag the cart. They're going to be able to write what the issue was, and they're also virtually tagging. And that's important because everybody is going to get the same follow-up information. Next slide, please. So again, here are the stickers. The pink sticker is a signal to the drivers, don't pick this up. The yellow sticker is, you know, the cart can still be picked up, but we're educating the residents. If you could click. And then the other thing that we have is our GSO Collects app. You can go ahead and click. And that is either on the computer or on the smartphone, and it is equipped with the Waste Wizard. And so on all of our education that's surrounding enforcement, we always put information, not just like, don't forget your collection day, but actually like what goes where. Use our Waste Wizard to find out that clothes go in the trash, kind of thing. If you could click. And then there is an example of what the app looks like on the phone. This app is powered by Recollect. I highly recommend it. It is one of the best things that we have ever gotten. Next slide, please. And now I will answer one question that was asked. Is the app an off-the-shelf option, or was it created by your city? It is a company that we are contracting with, but I'm not going to mention the company because it's not a great workflow, and I'm really hoping that there are some other companies that are going to be coming out with a better system that's designed specifically for tagging. It took a lot of work to get the app and the data management to do what we want it to do, and I will tell you why in just a moment. If you could click for me, please. So this is what the data looks like when we're looking at the map view. Each of these icons is a different thing. The pink triangles are plastic bags. The brown circles are yard waste, you know, different things like that. We can also look at different date ranges. We can search a specific address within here and then look at the details of that tag if we need to, if a resident is calling in and complaining, oh, there's no way I had, you know, a stroller in my recycling, and, you know, that did happen one time. And so we're able to kind of go in there and see like what the issues were and kind of talk to the resident about it. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. And then when we're pulling out the data, we're downloading an Excel sheet. We're then running it through a macro, and that sorts it based on if it's a repeat address. And then we have to change the first violation to a second violation, or so on and so forth, manually back in the system that we're using. And so that's kind of why it's a difficult workflow, because we're pulling data out, we're manipulating it in an Excel sheet, and then we're putting it back in the system so that we can pull it out again and create the labels and the postcards and stuff like that. So that's what this next slide is going to show us. And so we create the tags daily, we use the macro. These are what our contamination notices look like. Each notice has the date that the cart was inspected on, the following unacceptable items were found. In that little rectangle, that's the size of a file folder sticker. So if you're labeling your file folders, that's what you would use. We have pre-printed other things like construction waste or yard waste and like what to do with those, whether it's put it in the garbage or take your paint to HHW, that kind of thing. And if there is something other than plastic bags, then we're putting that label on there to let the resident know the specifics of what their contamination issue was. So plastic bags is more than 50% of the issues that we have. And so that's why that one is pre-printed on the postcard, because we were using so many stickers just for plastic bags. We figured it would be easier to have plastic bags be that default notification. And if you do have modified duty staff, this is excellent work for them because the paperwork is easy. And if you are doing a lot of tagging or ongoing tagging, then it's really nice just to be able to process the data and then pass the actual making of the postcards onto someone else. Next slide, please. Okay, and enforcement. So the postcards are also telling you that this is your first or your second notice of contamination. We have a 3 strikes, you're out policy. We are transitioning from a 4 strikes to a 3 strikes because for the first year we did a first, a second, and a third notice. And we're actually dropping that 3rd notice and just going to give everyone 2 notices, and then we're going to take that recycling cart away. Now, we're not in the business of removing recycling carts. However, none of our messaging is sugar-coated. People have complained about this. They say that it feels like the whole class is being yelled at by the teacher when one person was doing something wrong. But we really can't distinguish, oh, we should send this address a nice notice and this address, you know, a hard no on like what you're not supposed to be doing. So everybody gets the same notice. We also have a 6-month roll-off rule is what I'm calling it. And so basically January 1st or January 2nd, you get a tag, and June 2nd, that tag is automatically rolling off of your address and it's not going to count towards you getting your cart removed. That way, residents aren't going to be tagged 3 times over 2 or 3 years and then get their cart removed. We only want to remove carts from people that are frequently and egregiously contaminating, not those that make mistakes. Oh no, I don't want to get my cart taken away. I'm going to fix it. And you know, I'm going to try not to do it. I get some residents that get tagged twice or get tagged 1 time and they're like, please don't take my cart away. Can I get this removed? What can I do? And they're like freaking out about it. I'm like, it's okay. I promise. And because things aren't sugar coated, residents are more apt to call us. And I would rather residents call us and be mad at me, and then I work to kind of bring them back to my side and say, no, this is just an education program. We're not fining people. Like we really try to frame it as an education program so that that frame kind of is the sugar coating, I guess. But they have to call to get that information. Next slide, please. Now we do make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, residents will call me, if you could click. They will call our contact center. They will send me emails, if you could click one more time. Or I will get something in the mail, and just one last time. I have literally had residents send me a letter that either has their sticker in it or it has their postcard in it, and they're like, why did I get this? I was on vacation for 2 weeks. My cart wasn't out. Did you come onto my property and look in my recycling? And so I either call them or email them, or if they don't give me a phone number, I will mail them an explanation back that says, no, we didn't come onto your property. I went and I looked in our system. The system that we are using, I can see the actual location of where the driver or inspector was. And so sometimes I can tell they were either around the corner or they were across the street, or, you know, the driveways are close together and, you know, they picked up the neighbor instead, they picked up you instead of your neighbor when they had contamination. Now, we always try to err on the side of the resident, and that, you know, we're trying to get buy-in. You know, people threaten like, oh, I'm just going to stop recycling here, take my cart back. I've literally had people say that, and I say, okay, if you would just give me your address and I will put in a work order, and we will have our cart techs come and pick up your cart, so that you don't have to recycle anymore, because it's an option for you. You don't have to recycle. Nobody has ever given me their address and said, okay, come and get it. Literally people, I honestly think are just, I call their bluff and then they're like, oh, well, no, I'll keep recycling. Next slide, please. My least favorite way to get angry information from residents is via social media. There's just something about being in between a computer screen and on a social media platform that makes people a little bit meaner. So sometimes I have to do this because I'm just trying to get you to recycle right. I'm just trying to give you simple information, and you're super angry at me. Please don't be angry at me. Next slide, please. The other thing that we're doing is we are constantly tracking our data. And so we're inputting information based on the month, the day, the year, whether it's a red week or a blue week. And, we are trying to, make sure that we're really getting a good gauge of how we are tracking and how we're doing as far as how our residents are doing it as well. Next slide, please. So this is an example of our violations that we've sent out for July. I did denote the blue ones are our Monday and Tuesday, and the green are Thursday and Friday. And I wanted to look at that because our previous data and our previous contamination stuff from years ago really showed that Thursday and Friday were heavier contamination, a lot more garbage tonnage and a lot more bulk tonnage. And then Monday and Tuesday were more recycling, more yard waste, less garbage, less bulk. And so our contamination notices are kind of following that same trend line. And if you have, like other communities, this also follows socioeconomic trend lines where we see better recycling in higher socioeconomic areas and more contamination in lower socioeconomic areas. So I wanted to kind of give you a gauge of that. So we are seeing more tags in those areas. Next slide, please. And so our first year, like I mentioned before, we do the 4 strikes instead of 3, but we're transitioning to 3. In our first year, we sent out almost 10,000 first violation notices, those yellow postcards. And far, far fewer of the second and third, and we removed 102 recycling carts. Of those 102 recycling carts, 7% of people asked for their cart back. And we will give them their cart back. They have to come into our office, they have to sign a pledge that says, I understand what's recyclable, I promise to do my best to recycle right and not contaminate the recycling, and I have been educated on what is recyclable and what's not. We also talk to them, we answer their questions, we give them a recycling guide, we make sure they have a calendar, we give them our app, we give them all the tools that they need to recycle properly so that they can go with the best intentions. And then we wipe their slate clean so they don't have any more tags on their address. And our drivers and inspectors aren't looking at houses, they are literally looking to figure out what the house number is so that they can get it right. They're not looking like, oh, I know this one, I'm going to keep tagging this one, that kind of thing. So they're literally just looking at the contamination so everybody is equal across the board because everybody's trash and recycling cart look exactly the same. Next slide, please. And I also wanted to show you, this is what we've done so far this year. And so we're seeing a very similar trend, at least with our lots of first notices, many fewer second, third, and removed cards. And we're still in transition for dropping that third contamination notice. So that's why you're still seeing that third one up there. Next slide, please. Now, moving forward, I would really love to have an app that has better data management that we could potentially subscribe to. I've talked with a few different companies, just telling them like what we're doing, and they've heard about what we're doing, and I'm really just trying to encourage better stuff with our app, because the company that we're currently going through has said that they won't make any changes to make it easier for us. So I'd like to go from complicated to simple. And then the other thing that I would really love to do is to hire another inspector, or if I could have a whole army of inspectors, that would be great too. But I'm trying to keep my expectations realistic. So I'm just asking for one right now. And if y'all have any additional questions, I would be happy to answer those.
So actually, Tori, we do have a question. We have two, one from Jenny. I'm sorry if I get your name wrong, Kedward. She asks, is the app an off-the-shelf option, or was it created by your city?
It is an off-the-shelf option, and we are hoping to use someone else soon.
Okay. And then we also have a question from Tracy. Raised her hand, so I see that it's gone now. You may have answered her question. Okay, so then I'm going to continue forward. So our core lessons from all that we've learned, or what we just expressed earlier in the webinar about the phases of implementing a tagging program with rejection protocol for your community, and from all the great things we heard from the city of Greensboro with their tagging program and how they're working effectively to continue managing their contamination and keeping the contamination low through direct engagement with their community. We've learned that that's the key. Direct engagement with your citizens is going to help you mitigate contamination. Having a combination of cart tagging with a rejection protocol, and also continuing to engage through direct mailers and direct impact with your residents is going to help your stream stay as clean as possible. All of these efforts are intended to help your residents become an active participant in cleaning up the system. With the rise of contamination, we can no longer necessarily take care of the contamination for them and continue to push it through the system. We really have to bring them back into the fold, where they really begin to understand that when we say recycle right, here are the items that we know that you can recycle, and here's what we only want to have in our system. And this is how they can help, because most residents really want to recycle right, and they are making the best effort that they can. But throughout the years, the miseducation or lack of education and the increased convenience has really worked against us. So I hope that you take from this webinar that there are some key things that you could do today to get started. And on our website, if you visit recyclingpartnership.org, we have a drop-down box for communities. And under this area, you'll find resources that are ready for you to use today to deploy within your communities. We have our anti-contamination toolkit that can be downloaded from our Fight Contamination page. This toolkit, like I said, has all the information needed for you to deploy a tagging program for your community. It also includes spreadsheets and data files that you can use for tracking, so that way we're tracking measurable change. And then we have our campaign builder. Our campaign builder, for a lot of communities that don't necessarily have a graphic designer at the ready, or Office of Public Communication, or even a communications section or department, they can come through and use this campaign builder to develop print-ready artwork that you can immediately deploy within your community. We also have a cart recycling grant that is open for communities to apply to. If you're a community that is still using a bin system or a bag system and you're interested in maybe moving to a cart-based service, we have a grant that is currently open for you to apply to as well. We also have a social media kit. We know that social media has taken off in the last few years. More communities are being an active participant on Facebook and Instagram, and possibly Snapchat or any other social media outlets or avenues that are available. But we have a social media kit that has a year's worth of memes, videos, pictures, illustrations, polls and quizzes that you could use today and rotate them into your social media plan. The kit also includes a guide on how to engage through social media with your community. And it also includes information on insights, how to use the Facebook Insights appropriately, tips for boosting social media posts that'll get you the most bang for your buck as you're going through and using a social media platform to engage with your community. We also have a closed Facebook group. This group is a peer-to-peer networking group, and like I said, it's closed, so you can request to join the group. If you meet the requirements to join, we will accept you. But this group is a really great place for brainstorming, problem solving, and also just information sharing. There's also a lot of royalty-free media that gets passed through this group as well too, that can be used in different communities as well. And this is also pretty key around holiday time, when sometimes we're looking for innovative ways to engage with communities over specific holidays. Like, what are other communities doing? This closed group is a really great resource to you. And I encourage you to join if you're a municipal coordinator. We also launched this year our municipal measurement program. This is a state-of-the-art tool that's intended to help you track your curbside, drop-off, multifamily, and organics recycling program metrics. The really neat thing about our MMP tool is that once you upload your information about your community and the program that you offer, it will then provide you with recommendations and solutions that will help optimize your program. You can also use the tool to help build year-to-year data comparisons, and it's also great for those of you that have to report the statistics and progress for your program to a city council or county commission, or even just your upper management. But it's a great way to calculate and report key metrics for your program. So all of these resources are available through the Recycling Partnership. If you visit our website, you can eventually get access to a multitude of different resources that can really help you optimize your program and achieve the goals and successes that you're really looking to see through your system. And in conclusion today, and I see that we're wrapping up a little bit early, so I'll give you guys back some of your time. But in conclusion, I just want you all to remember that we are all in this bin together. You know, we work together to help the system thrive, because, as I said before, recycling is, the system itself is loosely connected, but it is highly dependent on different cogs and wheels in the system to work well together. So it's dependent on our residents, on public corporations, private corporations, manufacturers, brands, the processors and the haulers. It requires all of us working hand in hand to make the system work well. So I thank you all today for sitting on this webinar with us. And I know many of you are probably at a conference this week. It's conference time. So I thank you for taking the time to join us. And I thank you, Tori, for being able to hop on this webinar and tell us all about the City of Greensboro's tagging program. And I hope that you all join us next month for our education and outreach webinar as well, for that webinar Wednesday. So once we wrap this webinar, it will be available for download on our Webinar Wednesday web page. You will receive an email update saying when the page is accessible, when the webinar will be accessible, and then you can also go back in and register for next month's outreach and education webinar. So thank you, everyone. Have a good one.